Hello, guys. Welcome to the sixth live. Now, we are more than halfway there. We are on the sixth live, and I had planned 10 lives for this session, this entire series, Writing Fundamentals. I hope you guys are able to see my screen. Actually, I'm in split view, so I won't be able to kind of put it on the big screen. So I hope this works. Anyway, so today we are going to be talking about an exceptionally important topic, and that is scene, uh, anatomy of a scene. So without any further ado, I'm just checking my mic, I'm checking my video, and I have the presentation going on. Okay, so we are good to go. So let us begin with anatomy of a scene. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all back to my channel. Today, we'll be talking about the most misunderstood and kind of like the underdog of storytelling, that is writing a scene. Now, here's the thing. Most writers think scenes are just sections of a chapter, a chunk of text, or a place where characters talk. Maybe it has a bit of action, a bit of description, and voila, you have a scene. But that's not how good stories work. Good novels, the ones that pull you in and refuse to let go, aren't built from chapters. They are actually built from scenes. Scenes that carry movement, scenes that create tension, and scenes that create a shift that is inside the story or inside the character. Today, we are going to be talking about a lot of things. But first, let me quickly introduce myself to you. My name is Heena, and I am the author of Deceived, which is an award-winning novel, and The Manor, a novel that was published this year. It's actually a novella. Deceived is a psychological thriller. It's fast-paced. It's a suspense novel. It has multiple point of views. And The Manor is a gothic horror novella. It is based on Indian folklore, and it is full of creeping horror and slow burn horror, and it has a lot of supernatural elements to it, and the prose is very lyrical. So if you like suspenseful and well-written novels, then do check out Deceived and The Manor. Also, next year, my next book is coming out, which is on the craft of storytelling, that is the art of storytelling. I'm just going to leave this graphic here so that you can check it out, and you can just pause the video here if you're watching the recording, and you can see what all we are going to be covering in the art of storytelling. I'm not going to be talking a lot about other things today because I really need to get into the lecture, because today's session is going to be a little bit lengthy, and I have a meeting planned for 6:30, so I will have to log out at 6:15, and I really do not want to keep any topic for next week. So I'm just gonna quickly get into today's session. You can pre-order the book. It is available on Amazon also now. So you can pre-book the book on Amazon. You can get the other two books also from Amazon, or you can place your direct orders with me over DMs. Now, quickly, let's get into the session that we have planned today. Sorry. Once you understand the scene, Once you really get what a scene is supposed to do, everything about your writing will become clearer. Your pacing will improve, your characters will become more intentional, and your chapters will stop wandering here and there. And your plot will finally get the sense of direction it's been begging for. Today's session is going to demystify scenes completely. I'm just going to go back a second. We are going to be talking about what a scene actually is and also what it is not. Then the essential elements every strong scene needs, the 8 essential elements. Then we are going to talk about the structure of a scene. We'll also be talking about scene and sequel in this. Then, how to use setting and sensory detail to create cinematic emotion. The most common mistakes writers make while writing scenes. And finally, how to build a scene from scratch, step by step, with absolute clarity. By the end of today's live, you'll never look at a scene the same way again, even if you're watching a movie. You'll know how to write scenes that grip your reader, scenes that move your story forward, and scenes that make your characters feel alive on the page. So grab your notebook, grab your chai or coffee, and let's dig deep into the heart of storytelling, that is the scene. This is going to be a good one, so let's begin. First of all, let's talk about what is a scene. Before we learn how to build scenes, we need to understand what a scene actually is. And I promise you, this understanding alone can completely change the way you write. Most writers think they know what a scene is. And I'm telling you, this is true for 99.9% of writers. They think it's either a chapter, it's either a piece of action, a piece of conversation, maybe a location, or a block of text between two line breaks or two section breaks. But actually, none of that defines a scene. A scene is not a unit of formatting, it is not a unit of dialogue, and it is definitely not a unit of description. A scene is actually a unit of change. A scene is the smallest block of storytelling in which something shifts. Emotionally, situationally, relationally, psychologically, or narratively. It doesn't matter. But something has to shift. If nothing changes by the end of a moment or your scene, then it's not a scene. It's just plain writing. It's a chunk of writing. For definition, a scene is a moment in your story where a character wants something, something stands in their way, and something happens that changes the direction, the emotion, or the information available. This is the real DNA, I would say, of scene writing. There has to be four ingredients. There have to be four ingredients if you want to write a scene or for you to call a chunk of text as a scene. And those four things are, or the ingredients are, goal, conflict, outcome, and change. Now we are going to be covering everything later in the lecture, in the next session itself, in the next topic itself. So just hold your thought for a minute on this. Everything else, that is dialogue, setting, emotional beats, they all support these four elements. Now think of a scene like a doorway. When the scene begins, the character stands on one side of the doorway. When the scene ends, they cannot go back. They've crossed into a new emotional narrative space. Sometimes the change is tiny. Let's say a new fear, a hint of suspicion, an emotional crack. And sometimes it is humongous. For example, a death, battle, revelation, confession. but every scene must move something. Readers keep turning the page because they feel this movement. Now, what a scene is not. Let's debunk this clearly, because this is where 90% of writers stumble. And I would say 99% of new writers stumble. A scene is not characters sitting and chatting without purpose. Pages of description, it is definitely not pages of description. It is not a flashback that explains backstory without altering the present. It is not a monologue where nothing new is realized. It is not a fight just because we need action here. It is not a love scene without emotional shift. It is not a filler moment meant to stretch a chapter. Never that. If the story or a character walks out of the moment unchanged, then that moment serves no narrative purpose. It becomes a skim section. And as your editor, I'm telling you this, we want to eliminate each and every skim section entirely from your novel. Let's look at two very good examples. In Harry Potter, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. In Harry Potter, so I've got this new kitten, Harry, and he's been pooping lots of baby because of that. It's going on in my head. Anyway, in Harry Potter, the first encounter with the sorting hat, everyone remembers that scene. If you've not read the book, then I'm sure you might remember the scene from the movie. That works as well. So in Harry Potter, where we have the hat sorting scene, the goal is, now we are just going to talk about these four things that are on the screen: goal, conflict, outcome, and change. Okay. The goal is Harry wants to be placed somewhere safe. The conflict is the hat tempts him towards Slytherin, pushing his values. The outcome of the scene is Harry resists, and so he's chosen for Gryffindor. And the change that occurs is Harry gains identity, direction, belonging. The story trajectory shifts from there. This is a scene of internal conflict. It's subtle, but it's obviously transformative. The second example that we can discuss here is Pride and Prejudice, Darcy's first proposal. The goal of the scene is Darcy wants Elizabeth. The conflict is she rejects him hard. Outcome is emotional explosion plus letter revelation later. And the change is both characters' perceptions of each other crack open. This scene reconfigures the entire emotional architecture of the novel. Now, I'm pretty sure you might be wondering, but that is just one scene in the entire novel, right? But we are going to be talking about a lot about scenes today, and then you will see how each and every single scene leads to the next, and how there are exceptionally important scenes, and then there are some scenes that are actually just transitional. Okay, so we are going to be talking about everything. Now, there is a litmus test that you can do. Ask yourself, what is different at the end of the scene compared to the beginning? If your answer is nothing, or they just talked, or it was just setting up the next thing, or it's just showing their daily routine, then it is not a scene. It's just filler. And filler kills pacing, tension, and reader engagement. Now, why understanding this, basically what a scene is, changes everything. Because once you see scenes as units of change and not units of text, you stop writing filler. You stop wasting chapters on moments that go nowhere. You instantly improve pacing. You make characters more active. You increase emotional depth, and you create momentum that naturally pulls readers forward. So there are these 6 benefits of knowing what exactly a scene is. Suddenly, your story becomes alive the moment you understand what a scene is. It becomes dynamic, it becomes intentional. You are no longer writing just words, you are actually telling an immersive story. Now, let us look at the 8 elements every strong scene must have. Think of a strong scene as a finely crafted machine. Every gear, every screw, every tiny moving part contributes to the whole. If even one part is missing, the machine still functions, but it'll stutter. The story will feel slow, the momentum will dip, and the emotional resonance will weaken. But if all the 8 elements are present, if our machine's little gears and parts are working in harmony, in sync, then your scene becomes extraordinary, it becomes fabulous, it becomes very magnetic. Because readers will then forget to even blink or breathe. So let's walk through these 8 elements with the depth they deserve. The first element is scene purpose. A scene may be beautifully written, filled with witty dialogue, dripping with atmosphere, but if it doesn't do anything, readers will skim it, forget it, and maybe even wonder why it exists at all. A scene's purpose is the reason why you are even writing it. It's the answer to the question, why does this moment matter in the story? It's not the aesthetic goal. It's not the vibe. It's not the pretty sentences. It's not the fact that the characters needed to talk about something here. There can be 2 kinds of purpose of a scene. Now, this is very crucial. First is story purpose, and then we have which is actually external purpose, and then we have emotional purpose. Before we go ahead, let's just quickly first look at all the 8 elements of a scene. First is scene purpose, which we are right now talking about. Then is character goal. Then we have stakes. Then we have conflict. Then we have turning point, outcome, change, and hook. And we are going to be talking about each and every single one in detail. So right now we are talking about scene purpose, and we have come to the point where there are 2 scene purposes, external purpose and internal purpose. I actually wanted to move the presentation to the point where I was speaking because I had forgotten to move it forward. Okay, so there are 2 purposes. External purpose, a scene can have an external purpose and it can have an internal purpose. External purpose is the outward facing job of the scene. It moves the plot, it reveals information, it creates questions, it deepens conflict, and it changes circumstances, or it drives the story forward. One second. Just a second, yes. Now, external story or external purpose or story purpose, as it is also known, answers 3 questions. I think I have a slide for this. Okay, now. So the 3 questions that external purpose answers are: what new development does this scene add? How does the plot shift because of this? And what new problem, clue, obstacle, or direction appears here? For example, in Harry Potter, there's a scene of troll in the dungeons, right? So in that, the story purpose is introduce the troll, show Hermione in danger, force Ron and Harry to work together, and the result is trio forms for the first time. Without this scene, their friendship would not crystallize. Then we have the emotional purpose, or as we also call it, the internal purpose. This is the inward facing job of the scene. It transforms the character's emotional state, shifts a relationship, reveals a wound, or cracks open a fear, or forces an internal shift. The emotional purpose answers three very different questions. How does the character feel at the end versus the beginning? What emotional truth rises to the surface here? And what inner shift will matter later? For example, the pomegranate tree scenes in The Kite Runner, the emotional purpose is to explore Amir's journey, to show Hassan's unwavering loyalty, and to set emotional groundwork for Amir's guilt and cowardice. Nothing big happens externally, but the plot doesn't lurch forward, but internally, these scenes are the emotional skeleton of the entire novel. Now, as I said, the scene can have either an external purpose or an internal purpose, but there are scenes that can serve both the purposes, and those are called double purpose scenes. And these are actually the gold standard scenes that every good novel will definitely have. Now, for example, the Hunger Games, Rue's death. I love that scene because that scene has a lot of layering. That's why I'll be giving that example a lot today. If you don't know about it, then you can later go to YouTube and maybe watch that clip from the movie, or you can read Hunger Games. Hunger Games is actually pretty good if you want to learn about good story writing. So, in Hunger Games, when we have Rue's death scene, the story purpose is Katniss becomes the symbol of rebellion and the district begins to stir. So, these two are the story purpose or the external purpose. And then we have emotional purpose or the internal purpose. Those are Katniss confronts grief, her sense of injustice crystallizes, her loyalty deepens, and her rage becomes personal. This dual purpose layering is what makes a scene completely unforgettable. Before you write any scene, always ask yourself, what job is this scene meant to do? If you cannot answer that clearly and instantly, the scene is not ready to be written yet. Purpose is momentum, and momentum is what keeps your reader hooked from page 1 to the very end. Now, let's talk about the second element, that is character goal. A scene without a goal is like watching someone walking aimlessly in a mall, touching random things, turning corners for no reason. They look busy, but they're going nowhere. And as a reader, you stop caring almost instantly whenever you read a scene that has absolutely no goal. The moment your character wants something, anything, the reader leans in. So, what is a character goal? It is the specific, immediate desire driving your character's action in the scene. Now, it's not a life goal, it's not a dream or a long term ambition. No, it is a scene level goal. It is the thing the character wants right now in that scene, in this moment, which creates direction, intention, and momentum for that particular scene. Now, there are two types of scene goals. Again, external goal and internal goal. External goal or external character goal is actually action based, and the internal character goal is emotion based. External goals are visible, tangible desires. For example, finding the missing key, confront someone, escape danger, hide a secret, steal an object, get information, reach a location, impress a mentor, or investigate a noise. These are easy to track because we can observe them. Internal goals, on the other hand, are the subtle but equally powerful goals. For example, try not to cry, and I'm talking about scene level, okay? Try not to cry, stay calm while being judged, avoid someone, pretend not to care, hide attraction, control anger, build courage, make a decision, resist temptation, hide sadness. These internal goals shape the tone, the voice, the body language, the sensory detailing, and the emotional depth in a scene. So that's why these goals are so important. The best scenes, again, often have both external goal and internal goal. Many writers think every scene must have a large dramatic goal, but that is not true. Tiny everyday goals can create incredibly strong scenes as long as they matter emotionally to your character. For example, avoiding eye contact with someone you hurt, trying to keep your voice steady, attempting to act normal after receiving bad news, wanting to leave a room before panic shows, hoping not to run into your ex in the cafe. Small goals equates to big tension because the stakes are emotional and immediate. Examples, let's look at examples from across genre so that you can understand this better. In Lord of the Rings, when Frodo is at the Prancing Pony, the goal is finding Gandalf. The emotion beneath it is fear and dependence. This creates tension before anything even happens. In Persuasion, Anne's goal is hide her hurt when she sees Wentworth again. That's an internal goal, but the emotional stakes are enormous. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mikhail's goal is to extract truth from Harriet's old photos. This creates an investigative drive. In my novel, The Manor, Leela's goal is to follow the whispers down the East Corridor. Internal goal is to pretend she is not terrified. This dual layer creates psychological tension. In Hunger Games, Katniss's goal in the forest is to find Peeta before the others do. The urgency turns a simple search into a high-stakes chase. Remember, character goals energizes a scene. They give your plot traction, they give your characters agency, and they create friction, tension, momentum, and emotional resonance. That's why they're so important. A character with a goal feels real. A scene with a goal has purpose, and a novel built on such kind of scenes with goals will have a lot of power. Now, let's talk about the third element of writing a scene, of writing a strong scene. Stakes. If character goal is what your character wants, stakes are why it matters. Stakes are the emotional or practical consequences attached to the goal. They tell the reader what happens if the character fails in this moment. Without stakes, a scene feels unimportant, like something the reader can skim. And again, we do not want skim section in your novel. With stakes, even a simple moment becomes meaningful, tense, and emotionally charged. Again, there are two types of stakes. I think you might have guessed it: external stakes and internal stakes. External stakes are something real and tangible, are when something real and tangible is at risk. For example, getting caught, losing a competition, not retrieving an important object, being punished or exposed. missing a crucial opportunity, or failing to escape danger. These are the easiest stakes to write because they involve physical outcomes. And again, they are easy to track. For example, Katniss has to get medicine to Peter. If she fails, he dies. Clear and powerful stakes. Secondly, we have internal stakes or emotional consequences. Something inside the character is at risk when we talk about emotional consequences or internal stakes. For example, losing someone's trust, hurting someone they care about, feeling ashamed, confirming their deepest fear, damaging their self worth, being proven wrong, or regretting a choice. These stakes create emotional depth and make scenes resonate. For example, Elizabeth Bennet confronting Darcy's letter. If she fails to understand it, she clings to her pride and misjudgments. Internal stakes often guide character arcs. That is why they are so important. Now, let's look at the next element, conflict. Conflict, also known as obstacles. Conflict is not about sword fights or shouting matches. Conflict is anything external or internal that gets in the way of the character goal. Conflict makes things interesting. Conflict generates movement. Conflict forces change. Now, there are a couple of types of conflict. They can be people, say a rival, a parent, or a boss. They can be environmental, say danger, distance, weather. They can be social, like rules, expectations, or hierarchy. They can be internal, fear, doubt, guilt. They can be supernatural, unknown forces, magic, curses. They can be situational, even, like bad timing or misunderstandings, or just bad luck. Let us look at an example. In the in Hunger Games, Rue's death scene has multiple layers of conflict. This is why it feels so good. I mean, the death doesn't feel good. The scene structure, it resonates because it is well written. There is physical danger, there's emotional grief, there's moral conflict, and there's political outrage, layering. Even if your story is very quiet, like the remains of the day, conflicts still exist. Maybe they are internally, emotionally, or subtly. Now, let's talk about the next element. That is the fifth element, turning point or the pivot. And I'm not talking about Ross's pivot, I'm talking about actual pivot. Every strong scene has a moment where something shifts, often suddenly and sharply. This is a hinge, the moment everything tilts. This is the oh moment. The shock, the discovery, the slip up, the confession, the twist, or the decision. Without this pivot, scenes become flat, movement without direction. For example, Frodo offering to carry the ring, Snape muttering something cryptic that changes everything, Darcy's first proposal surprising everyone, including Elizabeth, and Leela hearing the widow whisper her name for the first time. The pivot should create a before and after inside the same scene. Now, the next element, outcome. The outcome is where the scene lands. This is the immediate result of the conflict and turning point. There are only four types of outcome: success, failure, partial success, or revelation. In success, character gets what they wanted, but often at a cost. In failure, they don't get it, and now the stakes are even higher. In partial success, they get some of what they want, which creates more complications. And in revelation, they discover something instead of achieving something. Revelation outcomes are the most powerful because they move the story into fresh territory. For example, Hermione's accidental discovery of Nicholas Flamel's identity. It's not victory, it's information, and information that kind of changes the trajectory of the plot and moves it into a new direction. Then we have element number 7, that is change. Change is the heart of the scene. A scene without change is not a scene at all. It's just a descriptive passage. Sorry. Change answers one question, and that is, how is the story different at the end of the scene compared to the beginning? Change can be emotional, situational, relational, motivational, informational, psychological, or moral. Any kind of change. We just want change. For example, Jon Snow leaving his uncle to join the Night's Watch. Katniss realizing Peeta may not be pretending. Leela understanding that the house is not just haunted, it is aware. Even quiet stories need micro shifts. Even subtle internal realizations count. And now let's look at the last element, that is hook or exit point. A hook is the tiny magnetic force that pulls the reader from this scene to the next. It doesn't always need to be dramatic, but it must create curiosity. Hooks can be a new unanswered question, a subtle threat, a promise, a discovery, a cliffhanger, a secret, decision, revelation, or a contradiction. For example, end a scene with, someone had moved the rocking chair, and I promise the reader will turn into the next paragraph right away. Hooks are how you build momentum across chapters. Now, you need to put all these 8 elements together and create an amazing scene. And as we will progress further in the session, you'll see how they all can be used together. Now, let's talk about scene structure. Now that we've talked about goals, stakes, and movement, it's time to understand the actual structure of a scene. And we are going to approach it in a way that is simpler, clearer, and far less confusing than the traditional writing terminology. For years, craft books that I've gone through have referred to scene versus sequel scene structure, and it is exceptionally confusing because they call the first part of the structure as scene itself. Imagine having a part named scene in a scene structure. That's extremely confusing. So I've used different terminologies, and these are the terminologies actually that I have used in my book and that you can read in my book, The Art of Storytelling. So in this lecture, we are going to use clearer and more intuitive terms. A scene is made up of 2 units, action unit and reaction unit. Now, if you are someone who reads a lot of books on crafts, for your clarity, I'll just clarify this, but to the others, I would suggest don't get into it, otherwise you'll get confused. So if you've been reading a lot of craft books, before you call me someone who doesn't know about this, I'll just clarify this. Action unit is what the craft books, the most famous craft books, refer to as the scene, and reaction unit is what those same craft books refer to as a sequence. So we have a scene and a sequence and a scene structure, and here I'm calling them action unit and reaction unit. If you have any doubt, let me know in the comments and I'll clarify everything. Trust me, I've gone through most of the craft books there are to go through. Anyway, so a scene is made up of action unit and reaction unit. Action unit is the external movement and reaction unit is the internal movement. And together these two create the scene cycle. Now, a complete rhythm of action, reaction, new reaction, which gives your story emotional depth, pacing, and narrative flow is called a scene cycle. So a scene cycle is composed of action unit, reaction unit. That is going to be your one scene. Then it is going to be followed by another action unit, reaction unit. That is the second scene, then the third scene, then the fourth scene, and so on. Let's break down action unit first. That is the external engine of the story. The action unit is where something happens in the story. This is where the character wants something, that is the goal, faces something, that is the conflict, does something, that is the action, and gets something, that is the outcome. The four elements that we just saw out of the 8. This is the outward or the visible movement. It's what the reader can see, hear, and feel happening on the page. Think of an action unit like a push. It pushes the story forward. Typical action unit ingredients are a clear and immediate goal, a problem, obstacle, or complication, rising tension, a moment of shift, that is turning point that we've studied in anatomy of a story, and a clear outcome. For example, Katniss sneaks out to retrieve medicine. Katniss sneaking out to retrieve medicine, a detective interviewing a suspect, a couple arguing in a cafe, and Leela stepping into the nursery and witnessing something unnatural. Even quiet scenes can be action units, as long as the character actively pushes something and something changes because of it. Now, let's look at the second half of a scene, that is the reaction unit, the internal engine of a story. If the action unit is doing, the reaction unit is feeling, thinking, and deciding. This is where the character reacts emotionally to what just happened, processes the consequences, reflects on the meaning, makes a decision based on new information, forms a new goal for the next action unit. Now it is making sense, right? This is the internal movement or the emotional breath after the push. Think of a reaction unit like the exhale. It gives the reader space to absorb the emotional and narrative impact of the action unit. Typical reaction unit has 4 things: immediate emotional reaction, slower reflection or internal processing, a decision, a new goal that leads to the next action unit. For example, Katniss grieving Rue and deciding to honor her. Elizabeth Bennet processing Darcy's letter. A character realizing they misread someone's intentions. Leela sitting alone after the nursery incident, trying to understand whether she imagined it or the house really responded. Reaction units add depth, character growth, and narrative clarity. Now, the scene cycle, the one that we have here on the screen, is the full rhythm of a scene. A powerful story flows like this, as you can see on the screen. Action unit, reaction unit, action unit, reaction unit, action unit, reaction unit. It's a continuous cycle. This rhythm creates natural pacing, emotional highs and lows, tension and release, clarity of motive, and realistic character arcs. For example, in Hunger Games, action unit, Katniss destroy the career supply. Reaction unit, she processes Rue's death. Action unit, she goes after the next threat. Reaction unit, she rethinks her alliances, and so on. In my novel, The Manor, action unit is Leela enters the nursery. Reaction unit is she retreats terrified, questions what the house wants. Then we have again action unit, she investigates another wing. Then we have reaction unit, she realizes she is being watched. See, action, reaction, action, reaction, action unit, reaction unit, action unit, reaction unit. And that is the scene cycle. So action unit and reaction unit together form a scene. Now, a full scene, a truly meaningful unit of storytelling is not just action or just emotion. It is a combination of both. Now, let us talk about our next topic. Setting and sensory layering in scenes. Setting is one of the first things your reader encounters in any scene. Yet, it's also one of the most misunderstood tools in writing. I have absolutely no idea why. Most writers think setting is just where the scene is happening. And then they describe the room, the weather, or the surrounding environment. No, that is not how it works. Setting does far more than tell the reader where your characters are. Setting does three essential jobs. Just give me one moment. Okay, sorry. Sorry. So my cat wanted to drink water and she was shouting behind me. So I had to go. Okay. Setting does three essential jobs. It grounds the reader in the physical world of the story. It sets the emotional tone or mood of the scene, and it shapes how the reader behaves, reacts, and feels in the moment. It does so much more. When used well, setting becomes an invisible layer of storytelling. It deepens tension, supports emotion, and makes your scenes immersive. When used poorly, it feels like unnecessary description or a list of furniture. And this is where sensory layering comes in. Sensory layering is the art of choosing just a few meaningful sensory details that reflect the POV, character's emotional state, and help the reader experience the scene rather than simply observe it. This section will show you how to use setting with intention, avoid over description, anchor the reader quickly, and make your scenes feel vivid and cinematic by focusing on the right sensory details. It's not about describing more, it's about describing what matters emotionally, atmospherically, or narratively. Let's see how we apply settings and sensory layers to a scene. A. By using setting as a mood and not a furniture. Setting is not about listing objects in a room. It's about creating an emotional feel. Two writers can totally describe the same room completely differently. For example, version A, the room had a wooden table, blue curtains, and a lamp. This is functional but lifeless. Sorry, then we have version B. The lamp flickered weakly, stretching shadows across the wooden table like long, tired fingers. Now you feel something. Remember, setting should support the emotion of the scene, reflect the POV character's mood, and subtly hint at tension or tone. When the atmosphere matches the emotion, the scene feels immersive. B, by following sensory hierarchy. Use only what matters. Following, okay, one of the biggest mistakes writers make with setting is trying to describe everything, every window, every piece of furniture, every smell in the room. But a great scene writing is not about describing more, it's about choosing well. This is where sensory hierarchy comes in. Think of it like a filter that helps you decide what to describe and what to ignore so that the scene feels immersive and not overwhelming. We have level one, which is the dominant sense. This is the single, sorry, you just have to excuse me for a second. Sorry, my throat is giving out a little. So on level one, we have dominant sense. This is the single sensory detail that defines the emotional tone of the scene. It's the first thing the POV character notices because it connects directly to what they are feeling. This becomes your scene's sensory anchor. For example, the coldness of the air in a haunted corridor, the sharp smell of disinfectant in the hospital room, the sticky humidity pressing against the skin in a tense argument, the blinding brightness of a marketplace full of overwhelming chaos. This one detail sets the entire mood. Now we have level two, that is supporting sense. This is a subtle secondary detail that supports the dominant sense. For example, the faint creaking of floorboards under the cold air, the flicker of fluorescent lights under the hospital smell, the crowd's muffled chatter under the visual chaos. So remember, the supporting sense will always support the dominant sense. You use one of these or maximum two. Nothing more is needed. There is a level three, but we are not going, that is the atmospheric sense, but we are not going to talk about it because unless you are writing an exceptionally layered, lyrical, prose, literary fiction, you literally do not need atmospheric sense. So we are going to skip it. If you want to read about it, you can get my book and you can read about it in that. But it's generally not needed. Let's look at a quick example before and after. Without sensory hierarchy, this will read messy. The hallway had old wallpaper, a wooden floor, a dusty table, two portraits, a broken lamp, and it smelled like mildew. So we see everything and feel nothing. But with sensory hierarchy, it will be layered plus emotional. We'll talk about a dominant sense first. A sudden drop of cold air kissed Leela's neck the moment she stepped inside. Emotionally meaningful. If we want to introduce a spotting sense, we'll use the wallpaper peeling in long strips, rustled faintly as though stirred by a breath. Deepens the unease. And then if we want to add atmospheric sense too, which you can do in some scenes, but only if you know what you're doing. Then what you can do is somewhere in the dark, a hinge groans softly, background texture. The result will be the scene becomes cinematic, emotional, and immersive using just three details. Actually, mostly we'll be using only two details. Don't try to describe everything. Describe only what matters. Use the sensory hierarchy to pick the one or two details your character would notice first based on how they're feeling. That's what creates powerful sensory layering. Now, see, by describing what the character would notice. Here's the golden rule. Characters don't notice everything. They notice what matters to their emotional state. Now, this is very important. A scared character notices shadows, cracks, and sudden sounds. A grieving character notices silence, emptiness, and fading smells. A furious character notices disorder, clutter, things out of place. And a love struck character notices the warmth, the color, and the little details. This is called emotional filtering. And it is key to immersive POV writing. Then we have this using the setting to add tension and not slowing the pacing. A common beginner mistake is stopping the story to describe the environment. If again I had a penny for every time a writer did that, I would be exceptionally rich, because I have no idea, as I said, why writers think that describing the environment is exceptionally crucial or important to prove a point that you are a good writer. It is actually not. Never actually. Instead, you need to weave settings into action and not descriptive environment passages. Here's a bad example to illustrate my point. She entered the room. The wallpaper was blue. The floor was wooden. The window was old. No, we don't care about it. A good example would be, as she stepped inside, the loose wooden flooring groaned under her weight, too loudly for her liking. See the difference? The description serves the tension instead of interrupting it. Setting is not about describing what's there. It's about describing what your character feels, notices, and reacts to. When you combine emotional filtering, 1 to 2 strong sensory anchors, and movement instead of static description, you turn your plain scenes into cinematic, immersive, and relatable experiences. Now, let us quickly have a look at the scene checklist. You know how sometimes you write a scene and something just feels off, but you really can't put your finger on what exactly is wrong with the scene. This is the case with most of my writers that I work with. So they are my writers, I call them my writers. Anyway, so this is the case with most of the writers. They can sense that something's wrong, but they can't exactly put their finger on it. So, and generally the problem lies on scene level. Take my word for it. I'm telling you. So, what you need to do is use this checklist. This checklist is actually superb because it's going to help you pinpoint the problem very quickly. A scene may feel flat or slow or unnecessary or just completely weird. These 5 questions will tell you instantly whether your scene is working or whether it needs some revision for clarity, tension, emotion, or maybe purpose. Let's go through each one quickly. Okay, so the first one is, does the character want something in this scene? Okay, I'm just gonna go back because I actually forgot to do it like one after the other. So it just has all the 5 points. So I'm gonna put that slide for later so that you can just know right now. Otherwise, you'll just be reading ahead and not listen to what I'm saying. That's why I'm just gonna stay on this slide. Does the character want something in this scene? This is the first and the most important point. If your character doesn't want something, even something tiny, like getting through an awkward conversation, the scene collapses. It matters because a goal creates direction, it gives the scene a spine. No goal will be equal to no tension. And no tension will be equal to no momentum. And no momentum will be equal to no reader interest. For example, in a quiet romance, a girl walking into a cafe to think is completely flat. But a girl walking into a cafe to avoid her ex, whom she saw on the road, but who actually turns out to be working at the same cafe. Instant tension. Even the smallest goal matters. Now, the second point in the checklist is there conflict or resistance? As we've seen a dozen times now, okay, I'm just going to move the slide forward so that I can read it from that. Okay, as we've seen a dozen times now, conflict doesn't mean fights or drama. Conflict simply means something that makes the goal harder to achieve. It can be another person, internal fear, external circumstance, the environment, time, social expectations, or even a memory. Sorry. If the character gets what they want easily, the scene dies. For example, in the final problem by Sherlock Holmes, just the presence of Moriarty is conflict. He doesn't have to do anything, his existence is enough. If everything is easy for your character, your readers will get bored. Now, I remember I had a client meeting, I think a week ago, and I was telling the author how, so I've already started obviously editing the book. So it was a check-in call. And I was just telling him how something that the character was doing did not uh, have basically any conflict or resistance. And so it was feeling a bit flat. And the author told me that the intention behind the scene should be enough of a motivation. But then I had to literally get into the entire lecture of stakes. And at the end, I just had to tell the author in very simple language that if he's not going to introduce any conflict, it is simply going to be very boring for the reader. And you know what? Then the author got it. And now we are reworking on kind of how we can increase some kind of a conflict there, make it difficult for the character to get what he wants, because right now he's just getting everything served on a plate, and that is not creating any kind of tension. So it's very boring. So I just thought I'll share it with you because conflict really adds a lot of spice to the story. If your story is feeling flat, most of the time it is because of conflict. Okay, so the next point is, are the stakes clear? Ask yourself, what happens if the character fails? Why does this moment matter emotionally or plot-wise? Stakes don't have to be life or death, but they must matter to the character, because if your answer to both the questions is nothing happens if the character fails, or it's not going to matter plot wise as well if the character doesn't get their goal, then it is actually not a goal. It's actually a very flat goal. It is not an interesting goal, and it's just going to make the reader bored. So, and you do not want that, do you? Especially when you're dealing with suspension of disbelief, you do not want your reader to be getting bored even for a single second. That is how writing works. Anyway, so stakes don't have to be life or death, as I said, but they must matter to your character. For example, stakes can be emotional. If I fail, she'll think I'm weak. Stakes can be relational. If I don't tell him the truth now, I may lose him. And stakes can also be practical. If he finds this letter, everything will unravel. If the stakes are not clear, readers will simply not care. It doesn't matter if you, as the author, know it or not, but the readers won't care. The next point is, does the scene create or reveal change? At the beginning of the scene, your character is at point A. At the end, they must be at point B. This shift can be tiny or massive, but it must exist. There are a couple of types of change. It can be a new realization, a new fear, a deeper suspicion, a small victory, an emotional crack, a worsening situation, a relationship shift, a new challenge or a question, or a new revelation altogether. For example, in my novel, The Manor, Leela entering the abandoned nursery doesn't change the plot, it changes her. She becomes more unsettled, more aware that something is watching and something is horribly wrong. The plot didn't move, but the story did. Then we have the fifth point. Is the scene doing more than one job? The strongest scenes multitask. They serve the plot and the character and the world building if you have one. If your scene is doing only one job, it's underperforming. Now, when I say that, what I mean is in a novel, in any chapter, you're going to have multiple scenes, and it's not actually important all the time for your scene to be doing multiple jobs. But if you're going to have a scene that is doing one job and then the next scene doing again one job, it is going to be boring. The pacing will sag. So what you need to do is, in case if you have a scene that is doing only one job, you need to make sure that the next scene is doing multiple jobs. So a strong scene might move the plot, reveal characters, shift the relationship, expand the world, plant a clue, build tension, foreshadow something, expose a secret, explore a theme, or any kind of change is okay, but it needs to perform on multiple levels, not just a single level. For example, the Yule Ball scene in Harry Potter. This single scene advances relationships, shows character insecurities, teaches world building, school traditions, strengthens plot tensions, reveals rivalries, foreshadows conflict, escalates tension. That is a multi-purpose scene, which is why readers remember it. If you answer yes to all these 5 questions, your scene is doing its job beautifully. But if you hit even a single no, that's a revision checklist then. This checklist helps you fix scenes faster than anything else because it targets the structural weakness, not the cosmetic one. Now, let us look at the common mistakes made by writers while writing scenes. Even when writers understand goal, stakes, conflict, and structure, scenes can still feel flat because of a very few common mistakes. These mistakes show up in every genre, and once you know how to identify them, your scenes immediately become sharper, more purposeful, and more emotionally charged. So let's go through them one by one. The first mistake is scenes where nothing actually happens. This is the most common and the most fatal mistake. The scene may have lovely writing, beautiful description, long dialogues, emotional thoughts, but if nothing changes by the end, then the scene has no narrative purpose. As simple as that. Here are 3 signs that it is happening in your scene. You can remove the scene and nothing in the story is affected. Your characters walk, talk, think, or describe things without any consequence. And 3, the moment feels like filler. It is a problem because readers feel stalled. The pacing drops dramatically and the story loses its edge. How can you fix it? Revisit the 4 essentials: goal, stakes, conflict, and change. If no change happens, the scene needs restructuring, or maybe just consider throwing it out. Then we have the second mistake, that is info dumps hidden as scenes. Another huge issue, writers try to disguise backstory or world building by putting characters in a room and making them talk about things. You can't do that. Here are the signs that this is happening in your scene. Characters discuss history, neither of them needs to discuss or know. A scene suddenly becomes exposition heavy. Information does not cause emotion, tension, or consequences. It's a problem because readers instantly sense they are being lectured and the emotion breaks. The suspension of disbelief will break. Here's how to fix it. Reveal information through conflict, through action, through emotional reactions, or through discovery, like letters, secrets, objects. Never stop a scene to explain something. Then the third mistake is dialogue that goes in circle. Characters talk, 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 but the conversation never moves. Here are the signs that it is happening in your scene. Thank you. Repeating the same emotional beat. Oh, this happens way more than you might expect, and it might actually be happening in your novel as well. So pay close attention. Repeating the same emotional beat, you sometimes as a writer try to stress on a point so much that you keep on kind of uh, unintentionally repeating it, and that really kills the joy for the reader, because once they get something, they get it. You don't have to say it again and again in different ways. Okay, then characters rehash an argument. So when you want to repeat the information, there are so many ways you can do it. Just don't go into the details again and again. No one wants to hear it. Then banter with no progression. Banter is good only if it is serving some or the other kind of purpose. If not, not necessary. Long conversations that end where they began. You can literally never have a conversation end where it began unless it's absolutely necessary. And I just got hot tea. My sweet husband just gave me hot tea. Let me just take a sip of it. Nothing's better than chai in cold weather. Okay, so why is this a problem when the dialogue goes in circle? Because dialogue must move the story or the relationship or the character's interiority in some or the other way. Circular conversations flatten the emotional arcs. How to fix them? Give the conversation a direction, a revelation, a slip up, a power shift, a decision, or a tension, or maybe a new tension. Then the fourth mistake is too much introspection. Characters who are stuck in their heads. And this one again is extremely common. Introspection is good, but only when it evolves. Here are the signs your scene might have too much introspection. Pages of thinking, or maybe paragraphs of thinking and reflecting. No outward movement, no new understanding, just simply rumination and emotional looping. Again, stating the same emotions again and again, over and over and over again, just to stress on a point or just to show how important it is from the story's perspective. It's a problem because again it stalls pacing and it disconnects the reader from the story world. So it is a huge problem. Here's a fix. You can anchor introspection to a discovery, a realization, a memory that changes something, an emotional decision, a new resolve. Inner life must lead to movement, not stagnation. Then we come to the last mistake, that is over describing settings. Many writers think describing everything will equate to immersive writing, but it doesn't. Here are signs you might be over describing settings in your scene. Long paragraphs describing rooms, landscapes, objects. The story pauses for description. Never do that. Irrelevant details clutter the scene. Why? Now it's a problem because description without emotional purpose becomes white noise. Here's how you can fix it. Use 1 to 2 dominant sensory anchors tied to the character's emotional state, which we call as sensory layering. Sensory layering. I forgot the name for a second. So most scene problems are not about the plot, as you just saw. They are about intention, emotion, and movement. When you learn to avoid these mistakes, your scenes instantly become sharper, more purposeful, more emotional, more immersive, and far more engaging to read. Now, Let's move on to the final section of today, how to write a scene from scratch in 7 steps. This is the part that is going to be of most use to you than anything else. The step-by-step method to write a scene. Because it's the one thing to understand theory and a whole different thing to sit down at your laptop and actually write the scene. A good scene, mind you. So let's look at a simple and powerful 7-step system that I've created. You can use again and again. This works for fantasy, romance, horror, contemporary, historical, literary fiction, and even for creative nonfiction, that is memoirs and autobiographies. Literally anything, basically. Let's build a scene from that. Step 1, decide the purpose of the scene. Never, and I mean never, start writing a scene without answering this question. Why does this scene exist? Your answer must be clear before you begin. There are 2 kinds of purpose. We have already seen them: story purpose and emotional purpose, external purpose and internal purpose. Story purpose must move the plot or reveal information or escalate conflict, and emotional purpose must either deepen relationships, expose vulnerabilities, or reveal fear or desire. For example, Katniss must retrieve medicine for Peter. Elizabeth Bennet must confront her shifting feelings about Darcy. If you are unsure of the purpose, don't write the scene yet. You'll just end up writing fluff. Think on it, meditate on it a little bit, and then start writing. Try to answer the question. Try to find the purpose. The second step is clarify what the character wants or the goal. Every scene needs a clear goal, even if it's small or internal. So ask yourself these 2 questions. What is my character trying to achieve right now? Why is it important today in this moment? For example, to overhear a conversation, to confess something, to hide something, to escape a danger, to impress someone, to find an object, to learn the truth, to avoid an ex at a cafe. A scene without a goal is like a story without direction. Step 3, identify what stands in their way. That is conflict. Once you know what they want, ask, what makes this harder? Conflict can be another character, a misunderstanding, time pressure, environment, or weather, a secret, a fear, a physical obstacle, their own beliefs, or supernatural force. For example, Leela wants to enter the abandoned nursery, and we can have conflict. This is not a conflict in the book. I'm just making it up for example. So a smaller conflict can be the door sticks, and the air is colder than it should be. The wallpaper is rippling, and her mind is racing. See, it's small, but it builds atmosphere and tension. Conflict gives your scene purpose, the tension that drives it forward. Then we move on to step 4. Decide the scene's turning point or the shift or the pivot. This is the moment something unexpected happens, the point where the scene pivots. Ask yourself, what is the moment in the scene that changes everything? And what a reveal, mistake, discovery, or emotional turn flips the energy. For example, someone overhears the conversation, an object breaks, a hidden letter falls out, a confession slips, the power dynamics flip, a fear is confirmed, a lie is exposed, a whisper comes from behind the door. The turning point is the pulse of your scene. Without it, the scene will feel flat. Now, step 5, choose the outcome. It can be success, failure, partial, success or revelation, as we've already seen. This is where the scene lands. Your character will either get what they want, fail to get it, gets part of it, or discovers something unexpected. Revelation outcomes are especially delicious, as we've already seen. The character doesn't get the goal, but they get information that changes the direction of the story. That's why they're so delicious. For example, failure. Harry doesn't find Flamel in the restricted section. Partial. Frodo escapes the ring wraiths, but gets injured. Revelation. Elizabeth reads Darcy's letter. And success. Jane Eyre resists temptation and stays true to herself. Outcome is what creates movement. Then we have the sixth step, that is define the change, or internal, or it can be internal or external. Ask yourself, how is the character or story different now? There must be a shift, even if it's a subtle one. External change examples: new information, new danger, new clue, new alliance, new obstacle. Internal change examples: a new fear, a doubt, realization, desire, shift in loyalty, crack in their confidence, spark of hope. Change is what separates a scene from filler. And then we have the last step: craft the exit hook. How you end the scene. Never end a scene softly. Never end it with someone going to sleep or walking away quietly, unless there is subtext there. Your ending must create curiosity, anticipation, momentum, unease, a question. For example, the letter wasn't addressed to her. The rocking chair had moved. He wasn't alone. The next knock at the door wasn't friendly. She should not have opened that drawer. The hook is the reader's invitation to the next scene. Now, how to bring it all together? I'll give you a little example where we'll build a little scene. So there are 7 steps, right? 5, 6, 7. First, purpose. Reveal that a character's mother was hiding something before she disappeared. Goal. The girl sneaks into the attic to find her mother's letters. Conflict. The attic is locked. Creaks loudly. Her uncle is downstairs. Storm is raging outside and fear is rising. Turning point. While searching, she knocks over a box and a hidden envelope slips out. Turning point can also be called as the point of no return. Then we have outcome, a revelation. The letter is not from her mother. Then we have change. She now knows someone else was involved in her disappearance. And hook. Now you just notice how we could have revealed the hook in the earlier 2 steps, but we kept it here because it is serving as a hook. The letter ends with, "This is the last time I can protect you." We want to know what happens next, so we move on to the next scene. This is how you build a good scene. This scene is simple, tight, emotional, and filled with movement. In just 7 sentences, I've alluded to a story that has so much more. And this is just something that I made up before the class. So if you really put your brain to it, if you have characters that you want to bring to life in the scene, you have so much to play with. Scenes always need to be built. Don't be under the impression that it's going to be a part of your discovery writing. It is actually not going to be a part of your discovery writing. It is actually going to be the planning part of it. We'll be talking more about it in, I think, the second last or the last live, about the discovery and the planning, but it is not a part of your discovery writing. The basic idea for a scene might be, but the scene itself is going to be a planned scene. Scenes always need to be built with intention, with clarity and with structure. When you follow these 7 steps, you will never again write flat or meandering or purposeless scenes. You will know exactly how to construct tension, emotion, movement, and momentum every single time. And that brings us to the end of today's session, Anatomy of a Scene. Take a moment and look at everything you've learned today. Scenes are no longer just chunks of writing or convenient breaks in a chapter. They are deliberate moments of movement, each carrying purpose, emotion, and change. You now understand what a scene really is, the 8 core elements that make scenes powerful, how action units and reaction units form a scene cycle, how to use setting and sensory layering intentionally to bring your scene to life, the essential scene checklist to make sure each and every single scene is strong, how to avoid the most common scene writing mistakes, and how to write a scene from scratch step by step. This is foundational knowledge. With this clarity, your chapters will become tighter, your pacing will be smoother, your characters will be more intentional, and your story will be more relatable and immersive. Every single scene you write from here on will have direction, stakes, conflict, and emotional resonance. Because now you know what it needs to carry. Even if you're not consciously following the structure, you'll at least know you need these couple of things to make a scene work. And trust me, once your scene becomes strong, your entire manuscript will completely transform and will become stronger. Next week, I'll be discussing dialogue that works. Now that you've mastered scene structure, it's time to move into the next crucial skill, that is dialogue. In the next live, we are going to break down how to write natural but purposeful dialogue, how to create subtext, how to avoid info dumps and talking head scenes, how to use dialogue to reveal character and deepen relationships, how to add tension, rhythm, and emotional layers, and how to make every line of dialogue do the narrative work for you. It is going to be a very loaded session because when dialogue works, your scenes will come alive. I'll see you all next Saturday. I'll just stop sharing my screen. I'll see you all next Saturday. Thank you so much for joining me today. Your energy and your dedication to learning the craft truly makes this series special. Go experiment with your scenes. Go play with goals and stakes. Go tune your sensory details. And most importantly, keep writing because your story needs you. I'll see you all next Saturday at 11 a.m. for live number 7, Dialogue That Works. Bring your tea, bring your notebooks, and come ready to level up.